All right, this is Taylor Elwood with the Mature Masculinity Podcast, and I am joined by my wonderful brother here, Tim Cheesebrow, who also he and I have done this 5 episode series called Bro Chat through his podcast. So I thought it would be fun to bring you on and interview you. So introduce yourself and tell us who you are, my brother.
Yeah, tit for tat. No, that seems fair. So I'm Tim. Um, I have Random Illusions is a podcast that I co-host, and I do crafting. I'm an occult author, and I'm a musician. And those are kind of the ways that I relate to the world. And I'm a father of 3 boys, and married to a wonderful woman, and that's those are the essential details.
They're all good essential details, right? Um, so I thought tonight we would talk about initiatory experiences. Before we do that, I just want to note to people who are watching this that the first episode of Bro Chat came out a couple weeks ago, and there will be more episodes coming out. So you're going to get to hear Tim and I going back and forth about some interesting stuff there. But this is one of the topics we didn't really touch on too much, I don't think. And so I thought it was kind of appropriate, and it was appropriate for 2 reasons. That was one reason. The other reason was that both you and I went through weekend experiences recently. You're fresh off the boat of a new warrior training adventure through MKP, Mankind Project, for those of you who don't know what that stands for. And I'm fresh off the boat from a Sacred Sons weekend convergence where both men and women were there. But both of these experiences, I would judge, were transformational and initiatory. So I thought it would be kind of interesting to talk about that. And I mean, let's take a moment, and I'd love to hear what's your definition of of an initiation. Like, how would you define initiation? Let's go there first.
Initiation is ushering in a new way of being for a person. It's saying uh, it's saying there's this there's a demarcation between your old life and your new life.
Hmm.
And we're going to mark that with some sort of ceremony. Um, I would say an initiatory experience requires the presence of other people, that you are being given the opportunity to grow, and you're being invited to a community of people, many of whom have already gone through a similar experience, so that you've got a community of support, and there's some relatability and openness that comes from having shared experience. I think initiatory experiences, we see them in Hollywood. When you think about an initiation, you might picture some some dark cult that is going to um, do some kind of hazing. Uh, yes, sir. May I have another? That kind of thing. And there's an element of that. It's not an untruth. I mean, uh, being uncomfortable is often part of an initiatory experience, but also uh, there's there's usually a component of a descent into darkness and coming back into the light.
Hmm.
And and for that reason, like in the I'm not a Freemason myself, but I read enough books on it to know that one of the degrees of initiation, you start out blindfolded and you go through a mock death. And that's all symbolic of leaving behind those things that were part of your old life, and you're starting something new. You're trying to be a new, better person, and this is a way you're choosing to do it. So that's a long-winded answer, but that's how I would categorize an initiatory experience.
Okay. I'll add my 2 cents in. I think that's a great answer, first of all. So that's one penny right there. Second penny though is I mean I also think it's an initiatory experience is an experience where the person is removed from their ordinary everyday experience of reality and taken into a liminal space where they are challenged to discover hidden depths within themselves as well as discover the mysteries of the universe around them via some type of activity, which could be psychological, could be spiritual, could be some other things, but it's some process. There are processes where the person is stretched and challenged to grow in ways that they are uncomfortable with, right? Because it's like, well, you're not going to come out of this the other side the same person. You're going to be a different person. So I would add that into the mix, just that aspect of the liminal nature of initiation, because you're in a very specific container and you come out the other side a different person, and you're not going back into ordinary reality the same way, and that ordinary reality will not be quite as ordinary as a result, because that initiation has transformed the way you look at the world and experience it and your place with it.
Beautifully put. I think one of the things that stuck with me for my initiatory experience was when we were oh, sorry, when I was uncomfortable, one of the leaders said to me, "Listen, man, you didn't come here to be comfortable. You came here to grow and to be different, and you can't be different and stay the same at the same time. So you got to give one of those up." And I'm carrying that forward in my life now.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm encountering experiences where there's an opportunity to grow, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm not here to be the same. I'm here to grow.
Yeah.
So whatever that experience is, I'm going to try and say yes. I'm going to try and do it even if it's uncomfortable.
My most recent experience, I've gone through at this point a couple of different experiences. I've gone through the new warrior training adventure myself. I went through in March of 2023, and it was a very transformative experience. I definitely got pushed in some really good ways, and I came out the other side a different person. Um, I most recently, as I said, I went to this event called Convergence. It was run by Sacred Sons, which is another men's organization. And they had women there, and that was interesting and a challenge for me because I've had a lot of wounds around the feminine in relationships in my life. And I went up there and I knew it was going to be a challenge. And I also knew that I didn't know anybody there.
Mm,
Kind of similar to the experience that I had when I went to the NWTA. I knew a couple people there, but I wasn't really even interacting with them. So it was again a very much a case, and that was an interesting aspect too of the initiation. We go to a place where I don't know anybody, and yet by the time I come out of it the other side, I know those people better in some ways than I've known people that I've known longer because I've gotten to know them in a specific context where the masks got stripped away. Here I am. My masks have been stripped away. And so they see me in my vulnerable state. And I had two experiences that really stood out to me from my weekend. One of them was I engaged in what's known as sacred combat. I boxed another man for 2 minutes, um, and it wasn't done with a thing of like, oh, I'm trying to beat the crap out of this person. No, it was, I came into it with love and joy. My intention was to become more assertive. His intention was his own. I'm not going to share because that's his work, not mine to share. But we boxed, and at the end, it wasn't like we'd beaten each other to a pulp or anything. I mean, we'd exchanged some blows, but we came out to the other side and we talked to each other about like what we had experienced, and of course we were the facilitators helped with that. And then afterwards we hugged each other tight and close and we talked for a bit, and I exchanged my number with his, and we ended up talking a few other times that weekend, and that was transformative for me because it's like, here's this new close friend, this person that I've met, and he only lives a couple hours north. So I know I'm going to see him actually in November. So that was pretty cool. Because I had people from all over the world that were showing up for this particular event. The other thing that was transformative was when I sat in, it was in a triangle with a woman and another man, and we were sharing like the ways that the masculine had wounded the feminine and the ways the feminine had wounded the masculine. And for me, it was kind of coming face to face and admitting like, here's the things that I've done. I mean, some of these things I've talked about before, but here's a couple things that I've done that I'm not, even like most recently, that I'm not proud of. And here's some things, and being able to talk about that openly in that space, that was part of this initiatory experience, because I'm no longer allowed to wear the mask. The mask has been stripped off. And I'm curious, was that, did you have an experience like that in what you went through with the NWTA?
Absolutely. Being a being a performer for a career, um, I'm very I'm very comfortable putting on my stage face, going out and being outgoing, and uh, being being vulnerable in a very specific way in front of people, but not being open to letting them see who I really am. They get to see who I am as a musician.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you go to a weekend where you don't know anybody,
And they don't know
nobody,
you.
right, they don't care what you do for a living. They don't they don't care what status you have, uh, high or low in society. What they care about is that you're there, you're being present, and you're being open and honest and sharing of yourself, that you're showing up in that moment, because just as you're relying on those men, and in your case men and women, to kind of hold space for you and to provide a support structure when you are being vulnerable, they're looking to you for the same thing. And the only way they know they can trust you is if you're present, and if you are part of the process, and if you're also being just as vulnerable as they are. And in that in that way, I think you kind of forge this, like you said, it's a community of strangers who become fast friends. And I really hope that I stay in connection with a lot of the guys that I met this weekend.
I have no doubt you will. I'm still in connection with some of the men that I went through on my weekend, and also just in connection with some of just the larger community that's available. And that's one of the things that I kind of recommend coming out of this work. Like, you go through a weekend and that's amazing in and of itself, but then to sustain that, to continue staying in touch, continue reaching out, going to like um, what's known as I groups, integration groups where you're continuing to talk about and process stuff. Or, and in my particular case, like I'm kind of going and doing a broad survey of men's organizations in general. So it's kind of where my work is taking me of late. Just like I did, read all the different books that I read. But I think it's important because that initiatory experience, to sustain that, we have to continually bring ourselves into touch with what fundamentally is called for, which is that growth, that willingness to share. And I really resonate with what you share because, like you, I am very good at being open in certain ways. I mean, I'm an author, as you know, just like you are. We both have written books, and I've gotten up and I've done lots of podcast interviews. I've done lots of um, talks and things like that. So I know how to be open to a certain extent with people, but the openness that I sometimes really need, that vulnerability, that is harder to have. Especially because in this world, it's so easy to filter that openness to some degree. I mean, I've done that a lot, like on social media, and I've done that at times to protect myself because it's like, well, how much do I really want to show? But
Mm-hmm.
being able to show that with people that I can absolutely trust have my back and are going to be there for me, that's a different thing. And that's one of the purposes, I think, of initiation, is that it also gives you a chance to just discover that there are people out there that you can connect with and identify with. And at the same time, like that those people will really have your back. Doesn't matter what happens or what you do, they are going to be there for you.
Yeah, there was an element of there was an element of folks committing to not judging each other that was entirely unspoken, but an interesting tightrope to watch people walk where um we're going to be vulnerable, we're also going to hold you to account, and we're going to do it in, I'm not going to say a fierce way, but certainly an assertive way. I find that also, um when I'm out presenting, either speaking or writing or playing music, um I'm comfortable sharing those emotions in a very polished way.
Mhm.
I write a song about something, it has some emotive content, but I craft it and I work at it and I practice it, and then I can present this finely tuned emotional piece, and it is a completely different experience to be asked to share those emotions raw, without any filter, without any poetry, without a guitar in front of me, which is kind of my security blanket.
Mhm.
Um, because I can be in front of a group of thousands, and as long as I got my guitar in front of me, I feel safe.
Right.
There were no guitars on this weekend.
Darn it, where's your safety blanket when you need it, right?
I know. I was like, hey, everybody's gone to bed. Can I go get my guitar and play a little bit? They were like, fuck no, go to bed.
Yeah. You know, in one of the men's organizations, Uncivilized, they call it being raw, real, and relational.
Mm,
And
mm-hmm.
I think that that is absolutely true. You know, like it's like we get to be raw, we get to strip all that stuff off, we get to be real, and we get to be relational. And that's kind of the purpose of initiation, is that, you know, you take away the safety blankets, you take away the guitar, you take away the author or whatever it is that you wear. It's like, oh, what's left?
You're just a man.
You're just a man. You're just a human. Here you are in all your rawness and your realness and your relationability, and it doesn't matter like what you've done or not done or anything like that. In fact, if anything, if anything, what's called forth is, well, what have you done? Where have you fucked up in life? I mean, I remember my experience around that, where I got up in front of a room full of men and I shared all the things that I had done that had basically destroyed my second marriage. Things, and it wasn't that the person I was married to didn't have stuff of their own that had contributed. Sure, but there was a lot there that I had not really spoken to because I felt such a deep shame, so much guilt. And it was one of the most liberating experiences of my life because I wasn't keeping it in anymore. And I spoke it from a place of like, I don't really care what anyone thinks of me because at this point, it doesn't much matter. I've carried this for so long and it has hurt me so deeply and it's hurt other people. All that really matters is that I share it. And if people want to judge me, whatever. But the thing that was really reassuring afterwards was realizing, well, no, no one here is really going to judge me because other people can relate in their
Mm-hmm.
own way, their own story, their own journey. Again, not speaking for any of them, but just their own story and their own journey that they could relate. And I think that that is one of the reasons why this kind of initiatory experience can be so important because we're not going to come out of it with the shields and the armor that we had before. We'll still have some of it because it's impossible to strip that away in one weekend. But it starts the loosening of all those, it starts you find the chink and you start to loosen some of that armor up. And that in and of itself is a huge part of what men need in order to show up in the world more authentically.
And even those bits of shame that you felt about that I felt about with my when I shared my things as well. Um, I came away with it with this realization that my precious little problems are not precious. They are damn near universal in some way, shape, or form. When I was sharing things that were deeply personal and shame inducing for me, I saw a lot of other men shaking their heads or nodding their heads, I should say, raising their hands, going, "Yep, me too. I've been there, man. I have felt that way." And to see that happen over and over and over, you get this sense that, wow, there are all these people dealing with some of the exact same things, and why don't we talk about it? I'm going to bring it. I'm going to bring it out of the masculine for a second and relate it to another experience that I went through in my life with my wife, which was we've had a number of miscarriages,
Mm,
and um, some of those were late enough that it was it was a little traumatizing. And what I learned through that experience too was how many people go through miscarriages, but nobody talks about it.
mm,
And as soon as you do talk about it, there's a whole chorus of people going, "Yes, I went through that too. Oh, I wish somebody would have told me this was normal. I wish somebody told me that, hey, this is part of the human experience. I wish somebody would have told me that when you're trying to have a family, having miscarriages is just part of the process for a lot of people." And I think had I known that going in, I wouldn't have felt so twisted up when it happened to me. And I feel that way about the work that was shared during this weekend. The things that I shared, the things that other men shared, uh, they wouldn't be such big issues if they were things that were just talked about normally and people said, "Hey, this is just part of being a human. This is part of living in a body. This is part of growing up and having, you know, just having normal experiences." Um, but if nobody talks about it, you don't know that it's normal. You don't know that uh, And normal doesn't mean acceptable. Normal just means that everybody's dealing with their own version of trauma.
Right. Well, and that's just the thing. There's nobody out there that isn't carrying some trauma with them. And my trauma is not more important or special or significant than anyone else's. It's different. And it has its and it's important for me to honor that, and at the same time to recognize like how much of that is just it's its own thing. Like and yeah, it's like wow, well, I'm not alone. I mean, I think that was one of the biggest realizations that I had when I first started doing men's work with other men. It was the first time I got onto a Zoom call. It was a couple months before my NWTA, and I got on there, and I was scared. Are these people going to judge me? Am I going to be able to even share anything? Most people who know me would probably be like, Taylor's scared? He seems so confident. But, like, but that's again, that's a face, that's a mask. It's not necessarily the reality. So I got in there, and a couple other men shared, and I'm like, oh, I'm not alone. And that gave me the courage to share. And seeing, men raise their hands or cry or whatever it was that they did, that was one of the most transformative experiences in and of itself because I realized for the first time in my life I wasn't alone. And I had felt
And that's
alone all of my life.
and you're not.
And I'm not.
And that's a huge realization. And what what you're getting to is another aspect of this work, which is, it's not all about um, facing trauma. It's also about discovering things in yourself that maybe you didn't know you had, resources that you didn't know you could draw upon, like courage. Uh, it's partially about finding that, yeah, you can take these masks off, and there's not a shriveled husk of a man left. There is a person who is flawed and beautiful and screwed up and glorious all at the same time.
A beautiful monster.
We are all beautiful monsters.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, that's true, right? And so, or how my friend Storm Constantine put it in her Right Through series, half angels, half monsters. I thought that was a pretty good way, an apt description. And and yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, you're right. It's not all about like, oh, you're gonna experience your trauma. A lot of times there is the joy of experiencing the gold, the joy of experiencing joy, for example, happiness, whatever else, like and realizing like these are all experiences that I can have, or that I have courage, that I have the ability to move forward and take responsibility for my mistakes instead of just continuing to hide behind them or put on a certain face or whatever else. And I think that that's also equally as important. And and yet it's not something that can just happen in ordinary everyday society. I mean, I've observed this that so often there are so many walls and structures that seem to be put into place where it's like you have to save face, you have to save face. Well, I want to sometimes just let my face come down and not have to save it and just be like, yeah, I screwed up, I messed up. I think for me it was interesting that weekend I came away from. The hardest part of that weekend wasn't the weekend itself. It was going home and texting my ex and asking if I could have a conversation with her, and then having a conversation with her and taking responsibility for a few things that I needed to take responsibility for. And yet even that wasn't that hard. I had already taken responsibility in some way, but I'd done it in a way where the shame and guilt had twisted me up inside. And I was able to let that go in that phone call. I was able to just speak clearly and concisely to what I recognized had happened, where I had made mistakes, and I was able to come to peace with it because I realized I don't have to carry this anymore. I did what I did. I've learned what I've learned. I'm not going to make those mistakes again. So that weekend kind of set me up to be able to have that conversation, a conversation I've been putting off for months because I didn't know if I could have it. And and folks who are watching this, this is me saying that on the fact that I've already at that point been doing like over 2 years worth of men's work. So like, if you're someone who's like, you go and you do this and you got it all figured out. No, like I don't always have it all figured out, and that's okay.
Yeah, there's a lot more work to be done. It's definitely not a one-off. But what you're describing, taking responsibility for the impact that your actions had on other people is a totally empowering thing. It makes you feel like makes me feel like I have the strength to change.
Yes, I feel the same way. Like I have the strength to change because I'm not keeping what I've done and I'm not hiding it. I'm not burying it in shadow. I'm not repressing it. I'm owning it. I'm taking responsibility for it. And at that point, instead of just having this, I can expand outward. Mm. You know, I'll tell you something that stands out to me right now is you look like you've been changed. And we talked about that before the call started, of course, you and I, but I wanted to note it on here. I see this glow about you, and just this. What I observe is like a sense of wonder, and it's really beautiful to behold, brother.
Well, that's about how I feel. There's a lightness of being that comes from releasing some of the stuff that's been pent up for a very long time. And also realizing that I'm the man I've been waiting for.
Yeah,
I'm the one who can show up. I'm the one who can do it. I'm the one who can get things done. And that's a totally, again, a totally empowering feeling. Um, I'm even finding that and you've probably already heard me do it 4 or 5 times in this episode, is correcting myself from making blanket statements about we, us, and you, and saying, no, 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 I feel I'm going to own my feelings and my experiences and not try and project them. Uh, Even though it's just it seems like a minor function of language, but it's not. It's a major function of perspective.
no, it's true, and I mean, I've caught myself a couple times too, as may have been observed. I mean, that's just I think that's part of the human condition. But it's like, yeah, okay, I'm going to take ownership for this. I'm going to use I statements instead, and I keep I get reminded of that on occasion by different people, and I always just kind of take it in stride. I'm like, yep, I don't need to be making a blanket statement here. I can take ownership for my thing, but not put it on somebody else. And if I'm putting it on someone else, well, there's probably some work there to be done.
Right. There's probably something there that you're trying to avoid taking responsibility for because maybe it's uncomfortable. Maybe it's uncomfortable to say, here's how I screwed up. Or even uh, sometimes it's hard to overcome the the smallness and the humility that we're told to show up with in certain situations and say, no, 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 I'm actually I'm beautiful. I've got something to share. I've got I've got capacity within me that I don't even know about. And I'm trying to discover that. Uh, all really powerful things, man.
Hmm.
So we talked about this on the bro chat a little bit, but taking this idea of initiation, which traditionally, and I'm when I say traditionally, I mean in pre-agricultural societies, would normally happen around the time of puberty. So, what's to be done about having some sort of experience or having some sort of something for young men to latch onto so that as they're physically becoming men, they have a sense of building this emotional, mental, spiritual capacity as well.
It's a really good question. I know there's some organizations out there that are doing some work around that. And in fact, I'll make sure to I know of at least one for sure. I'll do a search for it and put it in the show notes for anyone who's watching this episode. And I think at the same time, what I would observe is that aside from even that, just a man going and doing his work and coming back and being able to share that with his kids can in and of itself be a good model for that work and can start that process of initiation or something along those lines. And at the same time, I also think that there is something to be said for what can be done to give a young man that experience by an organization where it's not his parents, but he's taken away for a bit and then he comes back transformed on the other side with more awareness and depth as a result. And I don't know, modern day society doesn't seem to have that set up very well. I mean, look at our rituals of initiation for boys. It's, oh, you can drive when you're 16 and around the time when you can start to have sex. You can vote when you're 18. You can legally drink when you're 21, though you've probably at that point had alcohol in you. Most boys have, unfortunately. And oh yeah, and let's not forget graduation from high school. And if they go to college, graduation from college. And that's essentially the rites of passage, such as they are in modern day Western society.
Which doesn't really give you much.
No, no, it certainly didn't give me much. I never really felt like it prepared me for what it meant to be a man. I mean, I my experience, I'm 47 going on 48 now. And for me, I think my point of clarity around this was that when I was 45, I had this really harsh breakup, and I was left with kind of like, I don't even know what it means to be a man. I don't like the fact that I'm a man. I don't like the way that I've shown up in my life as a man. I don't know who I am. I've got to figure this out. There's got to be something healthier. And I don't want that for for teenage boys. I have two nephews that are teenagers, and they're good kids. I mean, I can tell from the last time I saw them, and yet I also want them to have that kind of structure that I didn't have. And I think that they've gotten a large part of that from my brother, but then I also think, parents can only do so much. And at a
That's right.
certain point, kids are going to rebel because that's just the natural order of things. That's part of how they become adults. They have to go out into the world and do things that the parents don't necessarily agree with. And I'm not a parent myself. I mean, I've been a stepfather, but I wasn't a good one. And I don't ever want to I don't particularly want to inhabit that particular role ever again. That's not what I am here. But you're a father, so and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, not only am I a father, I'm a father to three boys, two of which are preteens at the moment, and they are about to be in the thick of it.
Hmm.
And they're going to have lots of questions. Uh, I can only hope that they decide to bring those questions to me so that we have a chance to have some of these conversations.
Mm.
But if they're anything like I was with my parents, I'm not sure I want them to know everything.
Hmm.
I'm not, I wasn't as open with my parents as I should have been. And I think that had I given my dad the chance to be open with me in this way, he would have taken it. But I don't think I gave him that chance. I was too
Hmm.
closed off.
Hmm.
And that's my mistake. Um, and I can extend every invitation that I want to my kids to be open and talk to me about what's going on with them and talk to me about the questions they're having about becoming men and what that means. And um, but I fully I fully don't expect them to take me up on it. Um, if for no other reason than I just know that at that age I probably would not have accepted the invitation either. And I've got no worries about my kids. They're great kids. But I don't want them to just I don't want them to just have a good life. I want them to have an amazing one.
Hmm.
And I think if they knew the value of having a community of good peers, if they knew the value of having peers that were older than them and maybe even younger than them that they could learn from, uh, that don't have to be me, but they should be good men that are trustworthy, that have integrity. If they can find that and they can find the power in that and they can learn the strength that comes from being open and honest, I think they're going to have a better shot at that amazing life that I hope for them.
Hmm.
Um, but you can only lead a horse to water.
That's true.
And that's one of the challenges of being a parent is you can't, even if you know that something is going to benefit them in some amazing way, it's still their path to walk. And sometimes you have to be okay with watching them not walk it.
Right. So here's a question I have for you though. You've come back from this weekend. You saw your three boys. Do you think they noticed that there was a difference in you compared to before the weekend and after the weekend?
I'd have to ask him. I will say that when I came home from the weekend, uh, and I told you this before the call, but the very first thing I walked into was we always put our mail right on the entry table, and I had some mail waiting, and right on the top there was a big brown package, and I tore it open, and there was your book on
Dun, dun,
sacred
dun!
masculinity.
Yeah. You're not getting
And
away from men's work.
here it is. It's waiting for you when you
It's
come home.
you came home from a weekend of men's work, and guess what? There is more men's work.
And it was super cool. But now that book sits on my it sits on my coffee table, and I invited my boys to read it and to go through it, and whether they wanted to do it by themselves or whether they wanted to talk to me about it, I said I'm open to doing this work with you. Um, so the invitation is there, the information is there, and I don't know that I would have been thoughtful enough to have that option open to them before the weekend. I don't know that it would have crossed my mind.
Hmm.
But coming back from the weekend, I realized some of this stuff is just essential to their growth. And I really, really hope that they choose to take it up.
Mhm.
So, uh, one person that observed a change in me said, I can't really put a finger on it, but somehow this week you seem both softer and stronger at the same time.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, I feel softer and stronger at the same time. That's very, very intuitive and observant.
Mm.
And I guess, well, because there's more work to be done, we'll see how that keeps on changing.
Yeah, because it's not going to be the same. I mean, I look at who I was even like 2 years ago or a year ago, and I'm not the same man. And it's interesting because I mean we can all say, well, of course you change, right? People change, but I would say that because of the nature of the work, that like the changes for me have been expedited because I've got all these different men in my life now, where it's kind of like, well, there's just this different standard, and it's not even that they're holding me to account, I'm holding myself to account, but it's like, well, okay, I got to step up now. And so the person that I was even a year ago, it's like I don't, that person, I've changed so much in that time. And that's kind of the benefit of that work, I think, is that if you really want to do it, it'll transform your life. And that just shows that initiation isn't just a weekend event, it's an ongoing process.
It is. And for listeners out there, Taylor's not just he's not just talking in sound bites. I've known this man for 2 years.
More,
I I
you know me longer than that.
I think so. Yeah, I guess it has been longer than that now. I remember having conversations about some of those relationships. I remember the man you used to be, and it is not the man you are now by a mile. Um, and actually seeing your transformation is what inspired me to go on the weekend and do it for myself, because I thought, gosh, if this work can do so much good for him, I, I got to see what it can do for me.
Hmm.
So thank you for that. It's been inspirational to watch your journey and to see, and it hasn't always been an upward journey either. It's
Ooh.
there's been plateaus and such, but I there's an upward trend. Um, and it's palpable. So when you say this has changed my life, uh, having known you then and knowing you now, 100% confirm.
Well, and I can already tell just, I mean, I've known you for a long time as well, and I can tell that this weekend has changed you. I mean, I see it, I hear it, and I celebrate it. So I receive the gold that you just sent my way, and I give it back to you, my brother.
Which is another great part about this work is it what I found with the community of men that was on the weekend is that when we are sharing that gold with each other, it's cumulative. It's not a zero sum game.
Mm-mm.
It's not I give to you and I lose something and you gain something. It's we both gain something, and as we both gain something, all the men around us gain something. And as the men around us all gain something, we all take that back to our worlds, and the people in our lives gain something. And so on and so forth. To the more that we are showing up in an authentic way in the world, the better place we can make the world. And the more men that are engaged in this work, the better it's going to be, not just for all the men, but for all the women and for all of the people who identify other than man or woman, or uh, it's just it's a healing thing that really has an impact beyond our own spheres of influence, and hopefully has this great ripple effect that will eventually, I mean, the world's a screwed up place a lot of the time.
Hmm.
And one of the things that was brought to light this weekend is, and I can't remember exactly who said it, but they said, men really are not going to be able to heal the wounds that they have delivered to women, to children, to the environment, to our social and political structures. Um, we can't heal that damage until we heal the damage that's been given to us, or the damage that we've been carrying. That needs to happen first, and then we can go out and heal others.
We can be part of that
Um,
healing. We can be part of that healing process with others. I'll put that out there.
yeah, that's a better way to put it. But this initiatory work uh, is the impetus, and we have an opportunity to take that out into the world and carry it to a conclusion. Um, which I think is just a beautiful thing, and seeing all these men engaged in this work, doing doing what they needed to do to be better people, really brought me hope that yeah, there are people out there who are good and who are trying to heal themselves and heal others, and it's easy to lose sight that those kind of people are out there, because the stories that we see uh, in our daily news feeds and stuff, they don't tell that story. They tell the story of masculinity gone off the rails. They tell the story of people committing atrocities on one another, and they tell a story of hate and division and chaos. And it doesn't. That's not the narrative of humanity, and that's certainly not the narrative I want to write, and it's not the one I want to read.
Hmm.
Um, but we have this opportunity to create a different narrative,
Yeah, we do.
and that's where I think the the overarching goal of this work comes in.
Agree. Well, let's wrap up here. It's been a good conversation as always. You have any final thoughts you want to share on initiation and the role it has in men's work?
I think my only final thoughts would be to kind of circle back to where we began, and to say that growth happens when we're in a place of discomfort, when we're, like you said, removed from our normal, and given an opportunity to write a different story. And I think initiation is one pathway to doing that. It's a good one. And I wish as many men as possible had and will have the experience to do that.
Mm, agreed. Yeah, I think it's all part of that work that can be done to help make ourselves safer and as a result be safer for others. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you here and to see the transformation and to kind of share that fresh off the boat experience that both of us had with our respective weekends here. And to those of you out there who are watching, if you have questions about men's work, please reach out. If you're a woman watching this, please share it with the men in your life. And if you need men's coaching or a man to hold space and work with, I definitely do all that and would love to work with anyone there. And otherwise, take care of yourselves and each other.
Thanks for having me on. I love you, brother.
Love you too, brother.